beginning of the Beyond the Stacks Creative Library Careers panel. These are 4 gracious panelists who've agreed to come talk to us about their professions today. And you all should have a bio in front of you that they all sent us ahead of time, so you can know a little bit about their backgrounds. But if you guys just want to give a brief introduction of yourself, just a little bit about you for our students today, and then we'll get started. So maybe would you like to go first?
Sure. I'm Craddock. I'm a librarian at Burley Middle School here in Albemarle County.
And I'm Kay Buchanan, and this is my office space here. So I serve the Craddock School of Education in the psychology department. I'm their liaison, and a few of the departments of engineering.
I'm Matthew Gibson. I'm the Director of Digital Initiatives at the Virginia Foundation for the Humanities. I see I'm an alumni because I used to work in the digital library over at Albemarle Library.
I'm Dave Gibson, no relation to Matthew, and I work in the moving and section of the Library of Congress in the Packard campus, which is in Culpeper, Virginia.
Wonderful, great. So just to get us started off today, could you just tell us a little bit about your background, how you became first interested in sort of the library and information science field, and also how you just started to get involved in that field?
Sure. I actually had I have a bachelor's in film studies from Ohio State, and while I was getting that bachelor's, I was working in libraries basically, just to sort of, that was like the job that I had to pay my bills, but also like slowly getting interested in film preservation through my program. So after I graduated from Ohio State, I got a job at the Ohio Historical Society Archive Library, and there was like a small film collection they had there. I started volunteering in Columbus, Ohio, working on the film collection there. And around that time was when a couple of new programs, master's programs directly related to film and moving image archiving started up, one at UCLA and one at NYU. And I applied to UCLA and got in, so I was in the first class of that master's. So yeah, it's kind of like bringing, my professional background, or like what I had been doing a lot as an undergrad, and when I did my first job out of school, and my sort of academic interests together. Definitely when I went to grad school, because it was sort of interdisciplinary between the film school and the library school, I focused a lot more on the library classes because I already got my film degree, so I was more interested in learning new things about applying, library practices to film and movie and stuff. So that's sort of my entry into.
So I sort of fell into it completely accidentally. I came to UVA in '95 to pursue my PhD in English with the idea of being a professor. No offense against professors or anything like that, or tenure track stuff, but I basically got a job. Like Dave, to sort of like make money as a grad student assistant at the Electronic Text Center, which was basically the early incarnation of UVA's digital library. We were digitizing texts, putting them on the web for all the world to see. This is 1998. The web was still relatively young, 8 years old. But there were a handful, literally, of websites out there that people were actually using on a daily basis. And the e-text center was one of those. And I think what happened with me was like looking at how to create text. I was sort of a Luddite coming into it. I didn't understand technology, didn't want to be part of it necessarily, but just paying a bill. But I sort of fell in love with it, and it was primarily because it was my philosophical interest was really breaking down the sort of barriers to access to information, which of course is a huge library value, I think, and being utilizing the web to both manage that information, disseminate that information in a collective, organized way became really attractive. And really without that experience and then moving forward as a full-time employee at e-text center and then eventually directing it, and then moving the position I'm in, I would never be where I am today without that sort of initial experience.
Mine was accidental. I backed into it totally. I did my boyfriend's homework. And he was taking a library class at Buchanan University. And so I really liked it. It was reference, go find things, solve problems. So like today when we sat down and all of our names were backwards, I was like, what? This can't be. oh my gosh. So, you know, you run around correcting all this, and it's just fun. I like organizing things, and I like helping people and preserving the knowledge that we're creating here on Earth today, so that there's something beyond the Twitter hands.
I am sort of in a different boat from all these guys because I'm a school librarian. Right?
Yeah.
So I taught English, French, and Spanish for 15 years before I started library school. And I absolutely went into it deliberately. Like, it wasn't even an accident. I'm like, the library is the place for me. So I was hired. I went to library school, got my master's degree, worked all the way through. It was amazing and interesting. And I love about the school library that, because like all librarians, we have varied interest. The library is an amazing place because you can do all of that. Like everything that you're curious about, you can totally do if you're a librarian, which is amazing.
And as this is going on, I also want to encourage you all to ask questions. I definitely don't have to be the only one asking questions to the panel today, so please feel free to interrupt or raise your hands, and we can get questions from the audience as well. And there'll be time at the end also. So kind of just to follow up on how you all became interested and involved in this field, could you talk a little bit about what credentials or higher education, sounds like you all had some different backgrounds, or maybe just knowledge that you feel is expected in the field today as it's kind of changing and moving forward?
So in a school library, knowing, like reading a lot is very important, but there also has to be a knowledge of current events, pop culture, things like that. So I read a lot, of course, but I also watch a lot of television, you know, listen to the radio, you know, keeping up with that, what your patrons need is the most important thing. And my patrons are 11. So what they need is going to be vastly different from what people who are searching the Library of Congress catalog are going to need. And that is a matter of preference for librarians. There are lots of different kinds of libraries. If you like teenagers, you can definitely hang around in middle and high schools, little kids, but also if you have an affinity for a particular thing, like film studies, you can find a library that does that kind of thing. So because my background is in education and I like hanging around with teenagers because they're really hilarious, that is my affinity. So sort of, and I have a master's of education and not a master's of library science from ODU.
That's what I was going to ask you, even though.
I know, right?
Yeah, I wanted to know.
I'm Yale Dickinson raised.
There you go. So you have to have an education degree to be a librarian?
You do. You actually have to have a teaching license and then also a master's of education in library science. So it's sort of specific. So it's an add-on endorsement that you are required to have. And it's not one of those ones, because if you get your initial licensure, you can just take the tests for a lot of other things. Like I'm endorsed in a bunch of crazy stuff. Like I have an English one, of course, but then I took and passed the social studies one, earth science, Spanish, and French, which hopefully they would never ask me to teach earth science. But those are all ones where you can just pass the test. There's a couple like administration and library and reading specialist and gifted where you have to do another program of study that would lead to a master's degree.
I would add, just from my time here, some of the people who have graduated from a college with your four-year degree will come over here and get a master's. It takes a year and a half to get a master's, and that's what they're angling for, is that provisional license. You can do, there's different ways of doing that. As for me, I have a master's degree, and they were real, you had to have one from an accredited university. So the list, the American Library Association has an accredited list of these are the universities. And when I went into librarianship, which was 1982, you had, if you wanted to work at a university, you had to have a degree from one of those, or they wouldn't hire you. And so I went, I graduated with a degree from Catholic and went to work. My first day was at VCU, so I was down there about 8-9 years, and then I came up here. I think we'll touch on this with some other questions, but I'll briefly say, I don't think that's true anymore. because working here at this university, we're hiring just what we are going to call experts. So you may be an expert because you know how to do GIS, which is the Geographical Information Systems, and know how to make maps, that type of thing. Great, welcome. You get to work in the library. You may have expertise. Maybe you are a statistics major. My boss is looking for you. She runs the stat lab here that helps researchers massage their statistics. It's just a lot of variety, and we still have librarians who teach classes and consult with people about papers and voice browsing on them when they come in here to listen to my session tonight. But it's just a lot of, the gate is open. I think it's a great thing to know.
Yeah, I would agree with what May and Kay said. That, I mean, it's a lot of it depends on where you want to be in the library. The library, you can, any kind of position requires different kinds of things. I mean, I think it's always been, a place for interdisciplinary collaboration. Collaboration is sort of a new thing, at least especially amongst humanists, people studying history and English, not the traditional sciences, but being interdisciplinary, especially with the web now, tools that really help to break down what would have been really arbitrary barriers around fields and disciplines. I think because this walls are sort of beginning to diminish, the library really is bringing in people who've got skill sets in GIS, who've got PhDs in English, who've got business degrees to run a library and have you. But I also think, there are still, any position you can imagine in the library would require or suggest you need expertise in something different. So for instance, if you're into archives and special collections, an MLS still, and especially with a specialty in archiving, still something you want to look at doing. That being said, there's, over the last few years, there have actually been initiatives, especially within the R1s or big research libraries, try and bring people who are getting their PhDs and master degrees out of the humanities and other areas. Well, if I can't get a job in the job market, what can I do? Well, you can work in the library. There have been a lot of incubating areas to try and bring those people with this expertise into libraries to sort of see what kinds of asset they can be to that library. But again, a lot of it does depend on the library you're going to be working with and for, where you're going to be, and sort of what sort of subdivision within the library you're interested in.
Yeah, no, I agree with all of that as well. My particular degree was very specialized because it's specifically geared towards moving image archiving, and so it wasn't as all-encompassing as an MLS would be, but it was perfect for the position that I currently have because I deal with moving images on a daily basis, and it also kind of dealt with things that are very unique to working with that kind of material. So I do think that there are certainly avenues that you can explore where if you do have an interest in a certain topic and you want to preserve or archive certain kinds of things, you can go down that road. But but I do agree with what everyone has said about just how libraries are branching out and looking for people with more specialist knowledge, and certainly looking for people with just skills related to being able to crunch data as much as possible. And that's the current issue that we're facing is just sort of we're digitizing so many analog materials in our building now, and just how do we handle all of these how do we scale all of these projects that we're trying to work on? It's something that is a big challenge.
And public and school libraries, as you were saying, all of these different kinds of people in public and school, the maker movement has really taken on a whole new thing. So my affinity is for engineering, so there's all kinds of crazy stuff happening in the library. So people who have a desire to be in the library, but also have all these other little interests that they do, are becoming very valuable in library science.
I think the shift has occurred from you all reading about knowledge and learning what's already happened to, can you create some new knowledge yourself? can you apply what you're doing? Have all of you been introduced to maker spaces? Okay, so there's plenty of those in the library. They have a couple over in Albemarle Library where you just make objects. You might make them out of chocolate or hair. You might make a little Roman city or a car or an engine that runs and it's to scale. And what better thing than to learn how to put that all together and make things run and work as a team. And I think that's what curriculum at the university is also starting to go to. More hands-on, do a project. And then the library is supposed to be there providing those big spaces, providing people with a wide variety of background with knowledge about that.
We can find the information. So like I had a kid who came in and said, what I really want to do is to design and build my own drone. I have no ability to do this at all, but I can look things up, right?
Right.
So he did indeed program an Arduino microcontroller to power a quadcopter that he printed off on the 3D printer and flew. So all of that stuff can happen in a library with you, librarians, at the helm being the guider and the locator of information, which is an amazing, awesome thing because we could hang up our signs with the drone.
And that was before you got arrested.
No, it's an Albemarle County property. It's important.
Yeah, even if you look at the structure of this place around you, I mean, 15 years ago, even less, this is full of books.
This was books.
And like look around you,
Yeah.
there's nothing really except for tables and in you. And that's sort of the focus is you and tables and access to data and people like Kay and May teaching you how to use tools to access that data, to do things with it. That's sort of up to you. That's always, I think, been the librarian ethos, right? Is to teach you how to do what you need to do. Not to do it for you, but to provide that space that you can do yourself. It's a very DIY.
Space
Yeah.
connecting people.
Yeah.
What is Gail do? Dr. Dickinson, who's at ODU University, has a great quote where libraries are the intersection of ideas and information. So people show up with an idea, and you're the person who comes forward with the information. So here's what you want to do. Here's how that might be able to happen. Here's a couple of resources that you can look at. Especially for kids, teaching them to like do source reliability where they sort through this is good, this is bad, is a real skill that they'll develop. Search terms, they need to do that stuff. You guys are much better at it than themselves.
Any follow up to that? Questions? So to kind of go off what you guys were just talking about, what skills or knowledge do you think from either past experience or even your academic life is most valuable to you now in your role?
I think just, sort of the basic understanding of user needs and also just like trying to find out like how best to, because in some ways like we're now creating a product, like we're making things to send out into the world for people to see about what we do, to kind of get the word out. So it's like, so I think even just in terms of like, providing access to, finding new ways to provide access to the things that we're doing is something that I took, I learned a lot about it in school and applied to.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I mean, I think when I was in the library, the main thing I was doing was working with faculty projects, developing things that would fit their needs, their students' needs. And I think that the main thing that kind of activity taught me, and I think that this is sort of an activity that librarians and steward and carry forth is listening to your patrons, listening to your users, and trying to troubleshoot with them. But again, not doing the work for them necessarily, although that tended to be what we did, was doing the work for them. But to help them, do the work themselves. But I think that activity of collaborating and being sort of an active listener is crucial for me, and it's still hopefully leads to being successful in my position today.
Yes, I would agree. I think the biggest skill that anyone in this profession has to have is the ability to ask a lot of questions. not to just tell what you know, but to ask the person what they want to know, what they want to learn. And it's hard to frame questions sometimes. Sometimes you're dealing with a client who doesn't really want to talk, or their idea is not formed yet. So you've got to be applying a little bit of ramp up for them, if you will, and some motivation, and some enthusiasm. So I would say you really need to love your job, which I do and have since the day I first started at VCU. I didn't leave VCU because I was sad. I moved because we moved. So it was just, it's all different, but it's all the same. It's just helping people in life. We have something called a reference interview. That's a really old term where they tell you, they say, where they tell you how to talk to people. I think that will serve you well. As for a real hard skill, this is kind of a funny one. 1993, I remember a grad student came in and taught me HTML. And a grad student came in and said, you're going to have the first web page at the University of Virginia for my library because I'm going to have the first one for a school. And both of those things came true. And they showed me how to do it. It wasn't a professor. The university didn't have a big web page creator in the sky. It was just some grad students who said, well, I've been reading about this and now I'll make web pages. He went on to work for AOL and became a millionaire. Pretty good, you know. He had the chutzpah. He was out there. I really, really appreciated him. And for sharing, and I think that's why it's so beautiful to work with students, because, you know, you just learn.
I would second that. I actually wrote down before I got here that my best skill was that I really like to learn new stuff. So without somebody asking me, this is not something that I necessarily would have been curious about, but I definitely went down a research rabbit hole about the Carolingian kings in England the other day because a student had a question. So you liking to explore new avenues, new things, that is a skill that hopefully you will never lose. But in library land, that is definitely on the top of my list for skills that you need.
I think another thing that has become more and more apparent, for at least for us in our facility, is being able to speak both sort of library terminology and sort of more technical terminology, because we work with we have so many people now who are just basically there to like help us get items digitized and available, but they don't necessarily come from a library background. But we are sort of expected to both speak their language, or at least know enough about what they can do for us and what we need them to do for us, that we are able to communicate more easily with that group of people, and then with our patrons, and then with our fellow librarians.
I learned the word differential equations. That means, but I can go differential equations, and they go, yeah.
I think on that vein of communication, one of the, I'm skipping ahead, conceptions is that we're introverts, and that's not necessarily true, especially school librarians.
That you're going to point to me.
Okay. Well, school librarians, it's just not possible to be an introvert.
Shit.
Librarians talk to people all day long, every day. So whether you're in the public or in the school, I think special libraries, you get a little leeway to be by yourself for a minute. But if you are an introvert, the special libraries is where you should head. And if you enjoy talking to other people in university, school, and public libraries would be a spot.
I miss talking to people.
There's a place for any kind of person in the library. So I love that. I mean, it really is. It's a multifaceted kind of place. I think going along those lines, I think one of the myths you think of is, along with librarians themselves being introverts, is like it's a quiet, kind of boring place. It's like where the activity and the creative energy is. I mean, I think it's really it's the backbone of any university. I know that libraries, for at least I think since probably before, but especially when the web came around, they've been in this sort of state of existential crisis. Like, what do we serve now that we don't really, now that stacks aren't really the main thing we are? What are we? And it's you see, again, looking at the space, looking at the new libraries that are being created down on Ryle Road, places like that. They are places of community building and community activity and creative activity with the resources that, libraries can help you discover. I think it's a nice creative,
Yes.
a lot of creative energy.
It might be the loudest place in the school.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about it. Maybe with the exception of the cafeteria. The library might be the loudest place.
And then they create study rooms here, there's where it's quiet,
We
like,
had to shut off
what
the
is
back
that, the
office.
Harry Potter room? We don't talk there, but the rest of the place is gecko. We had somebody come over when we first opened up here, and there was a patron who was doing the shushy thing. I was like, that's just not gonna work here, see, because no one else believes it.
They're just ignoring you.
They just ignore you. You know how it is when you build a building, you don't lay the sidewalks that way, right? Because that'd be silly, you just see where everyone walks. Well, once they walk where they wanna walk, then you build the sidewalks. And that's kind of what happens, I think, in any library. I am amused when they want to put up a sign and say, this is the quiet study. So you don't need to do that, honestly. Why did the quiet people win in the Harry Potter room over in Albemarle? I don't know, but they did, and I didn't have to do anything. I'm good. I'm good. Very good.
So any other misconceptions and myths? We kind of jumped ahead to that a little bit.
We have glasses.
We were Christmas best.
Well, we do all wear glasses. So that's not a misconception. That's
It's a fact that we have to wear glasses.
if you don't wear glasses currently, go out and get some.
Sorry, you're out.
Well, I can speak specifically to the bit about my particular branch of archiving and libraries, which is to say that, when I tell someone where I work or what I do, they're like, well, originally isn't all that stuff on DVD already, and now isn't all that stuff on YouTube already, and it's not true. so much of it isn't, and there's so much out there still to be discovered. And now we have the additional problem of also having to, think about what happens to the stuff that's on YouTube. Who's archiving that stuff? Who's going to provide access to that? Generations from now. So that's one misconception that I think it's not true. We're still digging through, old collection. We're only just now putting a lot of old public broadcasting stuff online for the first time. That I think will be of great research interest. And
you're putting things that the media decided we didn't have to have as history
Right,
back
exactly.
into place. That's always a good one.
Yeah.
Back in the old days, NBC, ABC, CBS, they said, here's the news, and that's what the news was, and we thought it was, and we were sure it was because they said it was the news. And then you get to college and you start reading somebody, or you get a wild teacher telling you that's not how it went down in Selma, Alabama. And you're like, really? What happened? And everyone's not rich. And everyone didn't have a family with a beautiful grandmother and a dog and a white picket fence. Wow, who knew? And everyone didn't plan to go to college from the day they were born. You've got to be kidding me. So I think the library has a role in making that.
I do hate it when people tell me what to think.
I do. Is that nuts?
But I think one of the great things about libraries is that we provide access to everything.
Yes.
So because I come from an English background, so there was a list of books everybody had to read. We've got to read these, the canon. So in the library, the whole thing is open. It's reading by choice. If you're curious about medieval monasticism, go for it. It doesn't have to be as assigned. And I do love that, the freedom to read widely.
Yeah.
It's good.
What other myths do you hear about libraries you want us to confirm or deny? I'm real good at that. Yes, ma'am.
At least with public libraries, that they're dying.
Have you been
Thumbs
to?
down.
Have you been up on 29?
I mean, yeah, the new north side is beautiful, but
Yeah,
like,
the
that's
new
what-
north side. So what we just need is some pretty buildings. and we need to have them on good locations. I really wish that building had been on the other side of the town. And the reason is because everyone's going out of town, so they just practically go home and go to the library. But when they're coming to work, it's too early to pull off and go to that library.
It should have been on the.
It should have been on the other side, but that's just me being a strategizer of how to get people in. I don't think they're dying. I think they are providing job advice, places for people. I used to laugh about that digital.
So, yeah.
Digital, So, but I'm not laughing. I'm living in a neighborhood where people, it's a lower income neighborhood. People are trying to get jobs and they've got to go on a computer and apply. Okay, so they don't have any computer skills and they don't have a computer. Oh my God. So what do you do with that? And so the public library is a natural place for those people to go to and get help from people who are nice and want to help people. So,
I do see what you're saying. I mean, I think in some ways with public libraries, they have the same responsibility to the civic population. Obviously, it's a place for collaboration for, not students, not 11-year-olds, not high school students, not college students, but, for your mom and dad in town, whatever. Or for people needing to find jobs or figuring out how to fill out their tax form, whatever. But I do think that public libraries do have a marketing problem. It's like communicating what it is you were there for. That is a challenge. I mean, my family every month, this is only anecdotal, so you can't take it for truth at all, but every month we have $25 in the funds to the public library. Books we check out. I mean, I think books are still a valuable asset. I know that we can get everything online now. I think we can. But I think, reading and books are still valuable, especially in the public library setting. But I do think you're right. I think that, those spaces themselves, even looking at the new branch up Riot Ridge, 129, you wonder how many people are actually walking through that door, how many people are using that. And maybe it's because we're not sure how to communicate that to the population we're trying to serve.
One of the great things about the public library is how well they pair with the schools. So we have this morning, Angela Craddock, who's the YA librarian at Central Branch, which is along the downtown mall, brought 60 probably biographies over to the school and did mobile checkout because I don't have 60 brand new biographies to check out. My budget is $3,000 don't count. So I don't have, but the public library expands my collection by 100-fold.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm working to get on their drop off truck thing, but we're not there yet. But the public library is providing access to ideas and information, whether they're doing that. But I agree, they have a marketing problem. They do so much and nobody sees.
And the only marketing they get are when and this is what I love about libraries, exactly. When they have an exhibition about something that's politically jarring, and you hear that in the papers, right? What's happened at JMRL, the Jefferson Madison Regional Library here, about women's rights, right? And there had an exhibition about that, and there was some political pushback, and that's when you hear it in the library. And I think this is what I love about libraries. It's not a museum. Museums, their job, right, is to narrate a story using collections, right? A library, the collections are there. You're the one that's supposed to create that story out of those collections, or you're going to use those collections for your own needs. And I think, in some ways, libraries carry one of the heaviest burdens and responsibilities of any institution in existence in civilization. I think that to carry on and preserve our cultural legacy, that's the library's responsibility. That's one of many, right? But to do things like, how do we preserve YouTube and all the stuff that's being collected and created in YouTube? That's a librarian's job.
How do we get Hillary Clinton's email?
Right. And how do we store it forever? So you can access it forever. That's a librarian's job. That is a huge burden. And maybe even, certainly maybe impossible.
The CIA is actually hiring out of library school, especially the Master's of Library and Information Science, not necessarily the Master of Education, because the ability to organize giant swaths of information about terrorist organizations is a very valuable skill.
Yes, what we were looking for, if anybody had just come right down here, I got to drop it. And that is data mining, who would have thought? If you have data mining skills, and here's one of the examples that we did here at the library. When the President Sullivan was asked to resign, there was a lot of Twitter and everything going back and forth. And one of the librarians, or two of them, got the Twitter feeds and started analyzing it. And they went to go get them and they were gone. I was like, what happened? People were taking it down. And, how could that happen? And then the story 10 years from now would be a different story being told, because that was lost. And librarians don't like that. So we're trying to preserve it and say, here's what really happened. We may not go out and make the book, but we have one of you who will come in and make the book about what happened with the Twitter feeds. So how do you analyze those Twitter feeds? And once you analyze them, what's that say about you? So we get some of those people from computer science, but then everybody in the whole world wants the data mining person. And, they're like 100,000, 200,000. It depends where you're going to work. But that's library-like job.
Right. And the Library of Congress is presumably archiving Twitter. But beyond that, I mean, that's the thing about at least the Library of Congress, that we have the resources to collect a lot of stuff. I mean, we have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of film reels and videotapes. But yeah, being able to actually get, make sense of all that information, or be able to figure out okay, well, we want to look across all of these tweets or across all of these films and find something that's something we don't necessarily have all the resources to do or all the time to do. So I think that will become more increasingly more of an asset of you figuring out ways, through technology to data mine large chunks of data.
You shouldn't say this yourself, so I'm going to say it for Matt. He has one of the most interesting jobs. He's writing a history of Charlottesville, Virginia, and he makes an encyclopedia.
Well, I don't write it. Thank goodness.
You're the project,
That's right.
So all that can be lost. People are lost. People that we see every day, and we think everybody knows them, and nobody knows them. So they pull out the name and they write an entry, and it's all the history of Charlottesville and beyond.
That's right. That's right.
I'm sort of in the opposite position where I don't archive, I push out. So they provide the information and I disseminate, hopefully.
Any other myths, misconceptions about library communities? Good.
Actually, what's the state of international libraries around the world outside of America?
Working in them, or what is their state of being?
State of being.
I'd say it depends on what country. Sometimes they got burned. I think the Taliban took one down last year. They are out of resources, I can tell you that. One of the biggest things that we hear from our colleagues abroad is they're really interested in what they call the open access movement, where people who are writers, authors, faculty members, students even who write journal articles, they want them not to put them in the journal. Give the journal article to the publisher, then the publisher owns that article, then they sell it to the libraries, and then because you paid your tuition, you get to read them. Well, they don't have as many journals at those universities that I'm referring to, so what they've asked their faculty to do is write the articles, and then instead of giving them away, they pay a fee, and it makes them open access. They're very desperate because they're, it's a little bit more than 3,000, I think. But their budget to buy books and journals are way less than what we have. This is Wonderland when you're here at UVA, not so much Wonderland when you go abroad or go Europe, Asia, Africa, still needing lots of resources. Yeah.
That's not my area depth.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly. I mean, what I can say is that, there's a big movement in libraries right now, certainly in the Library of Congress, to go towards a linked data initiative away from marked records, which have been kind of which is sort of born out of a card catalog that I'm barely old enough to know what that is, and most people younger don't really know. But anyway, so just getting away from bibliographic records that exist that just describe what a library has, and kind of using the internet to connect library holdings and basically make it so that there is an international community of libraries that can share information online more easily. So I mean,
we're trying to partner with people
Yeah,
throughout the world.
exactly.
I had that here, trying to build, again, to this gentleman's credit, digital collections and build your digital collection, we'll share with you. UVA did participate in the Google Book Project for a while. We enter into consortiums and buy things together. So if you buy this, we'll buy that. If you'll preserve this, we'll preserve that. So that's got to be an effort worldwide, not just in one library or one country.
The school libraries are transforming because we're in sort of seismic shift land, where we're moving from a more archival, quiet study library into much more of a learning commons type environment. That as that shift takes place internationally, probably with the exception of Turkey and Ireland, they are half step behind. So as I publish articles for journals, those are being received mostly in Europe, I guess, is where I even know people. So we're like half step ahead, maybe. So as we start rolling out things like mobile maker spaces, they are just starting on that. Like the Artmobile, stuff like that, that's happening here in the United States is starting up over there. So I would say that we're like a year, maybe 6 months behind us.
You know, we're with a faculty member here at Curry who always goes to Africa, and she said the biggest surprise down there with regard to publishing was that they wanted paper to write an article. And yeah, it's please write an article. Now they wanted you to write about them in some way, tell us about what our people are doing, give us a baseline here, because that's important. No one's down there doing that. And so she gets a check if she does that. Now, if she comes here, that's like, wow, that's like vanity publishing, So we have a different criteria. So we just have to keep thinking about that. But the more that we get things open, the better, in my opinion. I mean, think of the millions of dollars that are given out by the National Science Foundation or the National Institute of Health or Institute of Educational Sciences, thousands, millions of dollars every year. And then the scientists figure out a cure, and you write it in a journal, and then they ask you to pay $100 for the article. And wait a minute, I paid my taxes, I bought that, that should be for me. So finally they're starting to say, yes, they have to put that in. And we're all excited about that because it's getting knowledge out there. And so I think the library helps advocate for that continually. Keep spreading this out. Let people read open access. Let them have access.
And in the public and the school, our job as libraries, and when we build our collection and choose what to purchase, we have to be reflective of our community. So we need to purchase resources that will reflect that community. So I can't say what the collection looks like in South Africa because they have a completely different culture and their purchases would reflect that. So while we might have 1 or 2 South African writers, they should have a lot more because they're in South Africa.
So kind of to expand on that a little bit, what future changes do you see for the library information and archival science field? And what are some ideas you have for ways students could learn more or gain experience if they're interested in kind of keeping up and becoming involved in this industry?
Go look at different aspects. I mean, this is a great place. You're not videotaping that, but you're videotaping. So how many of you have been on a special collections tour here?
It was super awesome, and if I wasn't a school librarian, I would totally be.
And you did you like it?
Yeah.
It's totally awesome. Huh?
Yeah.
Did you go? Who went over here? What'd you like?
What did I like? I just have a video making stuff.
That's where all the bodies are buried.
Yeah. Like they have things from the history of the University of Virginia, and it's like over there underground, where I'm talking about? Right in front of Alderman there, that's underground. There's things that kind of stick up in your way. That's the light source for down here. But they have like really fabulous history. They've got the first book ever, Board of Visitors, where 5 presidents signed. Think of the value of that. 5 living presidents signed. No other piece of paper has that in the world. You got copies of the Declaration of Independence. You got Faulkner's coat. He needed it mended. They've got horrifying things. A rope used to lynch somebody. They have a no. I don't know about that. I don't know that. I didn't want anyone to bring that up.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I don't know. No, I don't really know. I don't know. It's just we collect the history of Virginia, and we try to get as many things from Jefferson as we can. We have Faulkner's manuscripts that he wrote. We have a manuscript from John Grisham. It's just fascinating to look at and to archive and to how do you describe those so that people can find them and say, hey, I'm looking. And then Matt will take it and he'll digitize it and show you, hey, here's the manuscript. You didn't see that before, and that's pretty cool. And you can see how these writers were thinking when they were writing. And, you know, it gives a richness, I think, to English teachers. I mean, I would be giving kids manuscripts and going, can you make this any better? They won't know who wrote it. Maybe they'll make a better manuscript than the author who wrote it. We have many things by Mark Twain. I mean, it's fascinating to me. And you should go on a tour over there. You can go over and ask to see things. They make you leave your bags out in, you know, this room in a locker that you can ask to see treasures that are there. So that's one way just to get a piece of your history because you all go to UVA. I think that's great. Come and participate in some of our workshops where you'll see, so what are people doing? We had a workshop today on visualization. You make visuals for your research papers and put bar charts in here, and graphics, and put about a movie. And, you know, we had like 30 people. It was great.
Yeah, I think Kate's right. I think in the Scholars Lab, they used to, or they still do, they have colloquia that, you know, really interesting talks from sort of what are called digital humanists, people who basically are in the library, but they're also in some humanities field. They're utilizing the library to achieve their research results. And they always have fascinating people coming in and talking. Also, I think, you know, try to make yourself available to faculty researchers, faculty projects that are happening based out of the library. Again, I don't know how many are happening in the library anymore, but you know, when I was going through, I mean, there were probably 4 or 5, you know, different projects that were all happening at one time, all fascinating, really pushing the boundaries of our own curiosity, like always, like sort of thinking, how can we help this person achieve their result? How can we help to maybe make them see another way they can think about their research results? I think that boundless curiosity is an asset to any kind of skill set you want to bring into the library. Go down and check out the Digital Media Lab. And they have their own sort of maker space down there. They're doing fascinating things in the Digital Media Lab over at Clemens Library.
They can help you make movies. They can
3D scanning. I mean, you want to think 3D scanning is certainly part of a library, but it's sort of happening in a library. And that's, again,
I scan my face with an Xbox and then figure it out on the
it's totally cool, isn't
and
it?
use it as a bookend.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
and those are all skills. I mean, making movies, making 3D models of things. I mean, these are all things, and even just using social media. I mean, just all of those things. Once you are a librarian, to like get the word out to people about what you do and the things that are interesting. I mean, you know, making for us to like make like a little documentary, even just about like a certain collection that we got, or even just like, you know, what we do on a daily basis. A lot of people don't see, mainly because in my case, because we are sort of shut off from, you know, we don't have researchers come to our building, but it is still of interest, I think, for people to see what we actually do. And like, I think all of those skills are useful once you are sort of part of the profession. The other thing I was going to say specifically related to the Library of Congress is that we have every summer a paid internship program called the Junior Fellow Program. And we've had a lot of UVA students come and do that program. Basically, you sort of pick which department of the library, you know, falls into. So we have people in geography and math, so we have people in music, or even, you know, in art building, you know, whatever your specific, you know, topic of interest is. And then they, you know, those students come in and work with collections over the summer, try to find sort of unique items and treasures, and then do a presentation at the end of the summer for library staff, just about what they've found and what they've learned. So that's one.
So
One
that
thing
tells
you
you, ask questions. I mean, we had a grad student come in and say, I'm looking at, I want to say it was a monastery, and it was in Europe, and he was writing about it, and he had gone over there to visit it, and then he went to one of those talks, and where one of our librarians flew a drone around, and then he goes, what can we do to help you? And so it ended up, he was going to take this drone and fly it above that monastery. But that didn't work. I don't know if he didn't get permission, or the drone didn't happen. So then the librarians go, we can make this work. So they built some little, it was on a kite, and they attached it, and he learned how to fly it. There was this box kite, and then they made a little movie of it. Well, I thought it was really good because he has, you know, this, he made a model. He did that in Makerspace. So he knew about the Makerspace, and then he goes, well, let me show the real thing. And then he got that idea by the drone. And then he asked us. So I guess if you know some of our cool tools, maybe we can help you. We don't always just sit here going, gee, I wonder what they want to know. It's like you said, they come to you and you go, gee, I really wouldn't have known I was going to be looking at that.
I feel like I never know at 8 o'clock what I'll be doing by 4 o'clock.
Yes.
I think everything about school libraries is changing right now. We only used to teach research, so the English classes would come in and we would show them the database, and it was the same talk every single time for like 25 years. And I think that has shifted utterly. Today I spent the morning with a remedial math class, you know, making 3D models of their dream bedroom with cardstock and hot glue. You know, and then by the afternoon I was filming commercials in which I played a teacher. So I think what our job is in the school library has become a collaborative model. So we are moving towards becoming the expert in all fields. And the only way to do that is to have a solid base of research. So I have no idea how to do math. So I need to like study up ahead before the math class comes in. But I do have the time, the space, and the materials to make whatever that teacher's idea is happen. The teachers who is teaching nonfiction reading by having the kids do origami is coming to the library because I have both origami books and paper. You know, so being at that intersection in the school library has become critically important. We have become the expert researchers in the building because, well, everyone can Google. Nobody can Google as well as we can. Right? We have masters in Googling. Right? Our search terms are really on point.
Okay. Great. So why don't we give maybe one final word or some final words of wisdom to our students who might be interested in entering this field, and then we'll have some Q&A from the audience.
Well, I would just like to sort of reiterate that, I mean, I think it is a pretty good time to get into the field. I think, we're not like running out of data and information with the internet. We're only creating more. And so I think it's really interesting now, and I'm seeing this especially in my line of work because, we're really grappling with the fact that, we're not, films and TV aren't made in analog ways anymore. They're all made digitally. And so we have to kind of relearn a whole new set of skills that says, like, well, this is how we will acquire these digital files. This is how we'll describe them to someone who wants to find them. This is how we'll store them for, our great-grandchildren to see one day, the way that they can see like a film from, 19teens, So yeah, I mean, I think it's just like, you certainly have to come in with a whole new set of skills that I think even people had, 15 years ago when I went to library school. But I think it's an exciting time to pursue this as a profession.
Yeah, I agree. And again, I'm not formally in a library anymore, but everything I do on a day-to-day basis is understood through that sort of lens of being in a library. responsible now for foundations for creating content. I mean, really, one of the main places of publishing now is in the library, right? Especially the research library. There's all kinds of journal articles out there called the library's publisher. You know, and this drives people crazy, but it's true. I mean, there is this call for open access to content, and the place that's happening is really being driven by faculty, especially the research libraries. It's being driven by faculty who are wanting to publish their research online. There are no sort of like, the exception of Rotunda, which is the arm of VBA's electronic press, like other electronic presses, there are no sort of like formal imprimaturs for electronic publications out there. So the library becomes a way to provide expertise, those kinds of endeavors. But again, I think just go with whatever you're interested in. I mean, don't say, I'm just going to be a librarian. And the library is a place that can fit almost any kind of interest, curiosity. I think, you know, fundamentally, at the end of the day, you do have to have this kind of like service attitude. But there's a lot of service to library, so librarianship, I think, whether it's serving posterity, preserving information, serving the 11-year-old trying to figure out what his project or her project is about, finding information by scrolling through different kinds of data sources, and teaching people how to do that. There's a lot of it's instruction and service.
I'll be the practical voice. I would say, like, look, I'm not sure which positions you want, if you want school or if you want university. If you want university, I'd always look in the Chronicle of Higher Ed, look at the job ads and see what they want. I think you're going to see things like we just ran an ad, we wanted a science librarian. And the requirements did not say a master's in library science. And so we got a PhD in chemistry who applied. We had they don't want to be a faculty member? No, they did not. They wanted to be a librarian. So it was easy to teach those library skills, and we're up and running. So take a look at the ads and see what's needed. Sometimes they give you skills that they'd love to have you bring to the table. Like they may say, oh, we'd love it if you know Photoshop, and we'd love it if you know Excel, or in that case, you go to school at the University of Virginia, and we have a source called lynda.com, lynda.com. It's a database that the library serves up, and it's tutorials on how to do anything that you ever want to do. So if you go to the library page, just look on the main one, and it gets list of all databases, and then go to ELF. And you can sit there and do a 20-minute session on how to write code in R, or how to Photoshop something, or you can take the 3-hour version. There's many things to do, but I would say maybe working in, talking with people, asking people like us, email us, say, are there better schools? Some schools are better than others. Did you believe that? It's true. And some specialize in teaching, some in content, some in technology. So align yourself and your interest up with the school would be
I think at the end, I would want to emphasize how important librarians are to students and to the public. They are the only place kids can go where they want to find a piece of information and they don't have to ask. So if you have an LGBT kid who wants to know about whatever, they don't have to ask their teacher, their health teacher, their parents. They don't have to. So that service is so important to the community. And the archival librarians are the people who provide that information. So we as school and public librarians can show people where to find the information that they need without having to question them. We don't pass any value judgments at all, which is so important to librarians. Library records are like the last vestige of privacy. Like, I'm not handing over a kid's library records to anybody without a subpoena. Period. They asked me for Jesse Matthews' library records, and I had to say no. Can't have them, because we protect the privacy and the learning of the individual, regardless of sex, class, age, orientation, doesn't matter. So if you would like a job that is critically important to the universe, this is it.
Thank you so much.